Hey everyone, Joe Menza here, and we're going to do another lovely painting video. This time we're going to use 100% gouache, no watercolor, and you'll get a good idea on how that works. Starting off on some Fabriano Studio 11 by 14 cold press paper. Just wetting the entire paper down using the large hake brush. I'm going to be taking some yellow ochre gouache, just throwing it right on the paper. Just blending that in to create a bit of a background. Just to get basically a little tint on the background of the paper. We're going to do a lovely traditional mountain scene here. Throw in a little bit of white in here, sliding down the paper. I've got the angle set pretty high. Just blending that in together with the yellow ochre. You'll see the yellow ochre is so opaque that where I originally squeezed it out on the paper is pretty heavy. And that just shows you the opaque nature of this gouache. I'm taking some ultramarine blue and I'm just kind of streaking that in. Just kind of down and on an angle. Sometimes it's a good way to create atmosphere. Just instead of the normal way of painting something, you think about painting side to side, in a circle, just kind of up and down, and it creates kind of this vibe. As you can see, I'm taking some lemon yellow, and I just want to keep sort of a glow on the bottom here. Just kind of blending that in and blending it up to the top. You'll notice when I do, especially gouache, I like to do a lot of blending, which isn't really something you see too much if you watch a lot of watercolor videos. Blending is almost something that's done more with oil paints. But I find that it works well for me, and I can create a lot of interesting effects by doing it. I'm just kind of going back into the blue here. Just trying to keep that pattern going. And you can see if I go a little side to side, I could create some streaks and do some different things. It's important and fun to just kind of experiment and play as you paint and have a good time with it and try different things. Now here I've switched over to the fan brush, and I'm going to be creating some foliage. This will surround the base of our mountain. Now you'll notice here I'm not putting in the mountain first. And the reason for that is I'm just doing a little something different to see if I put that in afterward. What difference will that make? And this is the fun of experimentation. I've watched a lot of cooking shows, and you'll say, cooking shows, how does that relate? Well, when you watch cooking shows, they tend to follow a specific recipe. You use a cup of this and you use chopped of that, and everybody follows this perfect recipe, and you should get a dish that is successful and tastes the same. But with painting, there really isn't a recipe. There are techniques, there are different things you can employ, but ultimately, it's choices that you make that bring about your own personal look, your own artistic element that you bring to the table. Now you'll notice I've pulled that down and I've kind of created a little bit of a reflection look. And I've sprayed it with my spray bottle just to open it up a little bit. You'll find sometimes, and I always want to be able to explain to you how or why I do something to help you along. And because it is watercolor, I tend to find that by hitting things after you paint them with the spray bottle, it just breaks up the paint a little bit, and then it'll dry, and it'll create a very unique look. Once it is dry, it's almost as if painting straight from the tube and then putting water afterward. Instead of mixing the paint with water, I'm applying water and creating sort of a different technique or a different look or different effect on the paper. It's just another way to skin a cat, as they say. There are so many different combinations and so many different patterns and so many different colors and choices that you can make. You can spend multiple lifetimes. So for me, it's just a constant journey of experimentation. And if I find something I really like, I will use that many times. Now, I've painted in a shape of a mountain using similar colors that I've already used. And then I'm just going to take the fan brush and some titanium white gouache and just paint in some snowy peaks. And I'm going to let that snow kind of go into the trees below. That is a technique I found I like. If I use a little bit of white and I let that run off into the, like, say, the pines below or something below, it creates a very unique and neat effect, almost defining the trees below. And again, that's one of the things that I love about art itself, but the medium of watercolor, in that it's just a constant discovery of what happens when I do this and what happens when I do that. And eventually you have repeated success that you can take from painting to painting. But there's always a curiosity, there's always a sense of wonder as you paint. And even Ron Ranson, who pioneered the hake brush and fast and loose method, would find himself surprised that he stated in one of his videos that the hair on the back of his neck would stand up when he knew, as a painting unfolded, that he had a really good one on his table. And that is true. You could tell when a painting's coming out good and you really like what's happening. And you have that sense of, ooh, this could be something special. And that's also a time when you don't want to blow it either. You want that painting to turn out well. And, I hope I don't mess this one up. And messing it up is either by over fussing or doing something you can't correct. And you start to tend to feel that way about a lot of your paintings. And so you don't want to lose the artistic side. where you're still allowing spontaneity to flow. So sometimes you have to take a step back when you hit a point like that and just look at your painting and just make sure you're finished when you're finished. That's not always easy to know. Now I've added a little white underneath here. Just kind of want that reflection to look like a reflection. And some trees off to the side just to kind of frame it. It's just a common composition. They say there's only about 7, I believe, compositions really. And it's just a way to frame it, having trees to the side to create a sort of a tunnel down the center. And you can see this one here is starting to take shape. I'm going to take my card, and this is where I'm going to create a shoreline. Little rocky shoreline while this is still wet. And I can use this to create ripples and other effects. These little plastic cards are great to have on hand, but I do find the smoothness, like not every card is created equal. Sometimes you have to just kind of buff them down a little bit. I like ones with rounded corners. The little plastic cards they give you for your keychain, they call them loyalty cards, are perfect. So you can see we have a bit of a reflection going. I'm just going to blur that a little bit with my brush. I've used a little viridian green gouache in that shadow below. And you can see how using the white gouache in the shadow has made it look like it's reflecting the mountain above. Now I'm taking the hake brush and I've just dipped that in some yellow gouache, and I'm utilizing the tips of the brush to stipple what looks like leaves. And now you can see, look at how bright that has changed the picture fundamentally. Now I'm just going to go back and touch up some of these trees in the back, just turning the fan brush sideways. For brushes, I like to have a large hake brush. I have the very large hake brush, but let's just say 3 sizes of the hake brush. And then I like to have the fan brush, a couple of sizes of fan brush is good. And then really a rigger brush, which I don't really use a lot unless I'm doing regular tree trunks with branches. And it's not a bad idea to have a flat brush for certain situations and maybe a round. It's best not to get caught up into too much. This can be an addictive hobby where you find yourself with jars and jars of brushes, hundreds of different brushes that you never use, and hundreds of different colors of paint that you never use. Now, to further frame this out, I'm going to use the lemon yellow and create an area of land just by brushing that around. And you'll see by doing that, I've framed out the body of water under the mountain. It is here now that you can see the full vision of the painting is really taking shape. And when you do yours, I encourage you to go for shapes. Don't try to copy every element. Don't judge yourself by how close yours comes to, say, mine. It should be judged on its own merit. It should be judged for technique. It really shouldn't be judged at all, but if you're going to sit back and critique yourself, it would be great if you thought, okay, there's an element of myself in this, and I like what happened here, and this turned out well, and you should just look at it by itself and not be too hard on yourself for anything that you don't like. So now here I'm just going to use some of the pre-made greens that are in this little set of gouache that I have. And this is all that I'm using. I'm using a set of gouache paint that right out of the box that came from one of the hobby stores. And I'm just using the colors that are available to me. And the reason is because I do believe that a lot of people that watch the videos, they do not have access to, either the funds or the more detailed art shops. And some people will just say, well, I just want to have fun. And they'll go pick up a pad of house paper from one of the art stores. And the boxes of watercolor paints that they have on sale, you can get a box of 6 or 7 or 8 colors from Hobby Lobby or Michael's with a coupon for $5 and a pad of paper on sale, and spend maybe $10 or $15, and you may find a brush that looks like the Ron Ranson brush, and it's okay. Sometimes the hairs come out and a few other little things, but it's not really about I got to have the perfect brush. I have to have the perfect paint. It's about putting the paint on paper, enjoying the experience, and having some fun, especially if you're a beginner. Down the road, if you decide this is a long-term thing for you, you can go and buy more expensive things. You can buy an easel or a table or, some of those things along the way, but you don't need that in the beginning. I've added some white to the top here now, and I just wanted to create a little bit more light at the top. With gouache, you can add paint and you can blend and you can reactivate. You don't have to worry about going back over something, as you might have to with watercolor. Watercolor is traditionally best done with brush strokes and then left alone. But gouache can be used more like a oil painter's medium, where you can go back, you can add strokes, you can touch up. And that's one of the great things about it. And I do strongly suggest, at some point, trying gouache and seeing if it's something you like. Now here I'm going to go in and I'm going to start doing some highlight colors. This is another wonderful thing about gouache, in that you can paint from dark to light. Watercolor is traditionally done by painting from light to dark. And I can go in and, as you can see, I can go over the top with yellow ochre gouache, lemon yellow. You can also do that with watercolor as well, but it's done a bit more successfully with gouache. I'm putting a little bit of that color in the water to reflect the foliage from above. That was a bit too much there, but that's okay. Don't worry about that. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to highlight all of the foliage to create a very bright scene. And see, I can break that up with the plastic card. And go in and do a variety of highlighting. There's not a whole lot left to be done here. This is sort of my minor detail stage when I step back and look at the painting and see if there's anything I can do to do any little enhancements or make things stand out a little bit more. Take a look and see if I see any peculiar shapes that might be bothersome to the eye. But for the most part, I'm pretty happy with this. And just by doing some stippling, giving it a little spray with a spray bottle, those little combination of things can cause things to run together. I can take my card now and I can create sticks and branches. I can also stipple different colors in, different shades of yellow. I can do lemon yellow and yellow ochre. And you can also add a little bit of white to that and lighten it up and create even lighter shades of yellow. And you'll notice how it brightens the whole thing up. And of course, lastly, we can do little effects like putting a little shine, a little crest on the water. We can add a little bit of white to create ripples. You can also wet the paint and lift color to create ripples. Again, there are so many different combinations of the way you can do things. There isn't just one set of steps. As I said with the recipes, it's not really like boiling water. You put a pot of water on the stove, boil it to 265 or whatever that is, and you have boiling water. This is art. And you can see I've added a little white to the edge of a credit card, and I'm just putting that in to create little ripples. And look at, just amazing how quickly that creates that effect. And that little bit of green and the little bit of white in the reflection, that little bit of viridian, just gives it that little special touch. And the vertical way of painting in the sky kind of creates the light to kind of push the viewer down to the mountain. Keeps you down, keeps you centered. Again, just a little bit of enhancement to this foliage. A little bit of spray. Again, I do that to kind of just make everything blend together. I had that moment when I was painting mountains and I couldn't get them to look as realistic as I liked. Early on, I kept painting mountains. And I don't know, one day I think I picked up a spray bottle for some reason. And I just tried it, and it caused the paint to just have a look to it that I really liked. And from that moment on, the spray bottle stayed with me. So again, back to the fan brush, I'm just kind of pulling down a little bit of that white from the mountain and defining those little pines. Again, this is just little details. And it's not fussing. If you're enjoying what you're doing and you feel like what you're doing is tweaking and bringing about necessary change. Now here I'm just going to pop in a couple of birds. Let's take a look back on the easel, step back, and there's the finished painting. And here it is. I hope you enjoyed this wonderful mountain scene. I thank you for watching, and I do wish you the best on your painting. We'll see you next time.